How are you? Okay, you okay today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm just been doing a bit of work. I just dropped my daughter off at the stage. She's off to see her gran in Scotland, so I just dropped her off and about to go for a run after this. So it's a bit hot out there today. But
yeah.
yeah,
Nice weather. Been nice
yeah.
weather.
Hope
Cool.
you're well.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm not too bad. Yeah, like I said, weather's nice, so yeah, can't complain really. All good.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for speaking to me and asking. I just wanted to ask you some
No
questions
problem.
about your career. So to start off with,
Yeah, yeah.
could you tell me a little bit more about where you was born, where you grew up, and what it was like for you growing up?
All right. Okay. The short version of this then. Yeah, born in Glasgow
Okay.
in 1962. July 1962, and was brought up there basically. Apart from when I was about 3 years old, we lived in Blackpool
Okay.
for a while. Those are my earliest memories in life, actually. We lived quite central Blackpool, not far from the town. I particularly remember the high waves in the winter coming over the head of me as a wee 3-year-old.
Okay.
And then I moved back to Glasgow and Ibrox, and then at the age of 6 moved to Rutherglen, and uh, yeah, just had a really happy childhood. Um,
Lovely.
Going into my teen years and whatever. Really enjoyed my school years,
Yeah.
um, and always enjoyed writing. I suppose that's the other relevant thing to mention. Um, and then and in 1979, uh, went to university. I was studying law, but
Okay.
I dropped out of that. I've been trying for a few years to crack getting into writing, particularly television writing. Got the Doctor Who gig. Was doing a couple of other things like radio and TV comedy writing, and I wasn't really enjoying the law because I just it was. I went into it. I chose law
Yeah.
because I was interested in the police career as well. Um, but I found the subject quite dry for the most part,
Okay.
uh, and then decided to concentrate on the writing career.
Okay.
So that was that.
So
Yeah.
do you live back in Scotland now? Have you moved back there? Or?
No. I live actually just outside Greater London. My home is actually in Surrey,
Okay.
but Greater London is one less than a mile in that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
So basically, I live in London, and I've lived down here since 1984.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I came down here to join the Metropolitan Police in September 1984,
Okay.
and I had did my 30 years there, retired from the Met in 2014.
Okay. Yeah, I'm right next to Surrey. I'm in Berkshire. I'm in Bracknell, but we've got Camberley, Surrey, right next to me.
That's the other end. I'm actually very close to the Kent border here. I'm in Warren
Oh, okay.
in Surrey, and Kent is again just a couple of miles behind me.
Cool.
Hmm.
You've already touched a little bit of this, but what made you want to become a writer as a career path, and how did you go about this?
I don't think it was ever a conscious decision, except I always just enjoyed doing it. I got a typewriter as a Christmas present when I was about 7 or 8, I think 7,
Mhm.
and so I taught myself to type, and yeah, I just always wrote little stories and little mini books and things, and uh, but I always had in mind, I had this aspiration to be a writer, and it wasn't just Doctor Who. Doctor Who turned out to be quite a nice thing of an interest in because it was there year after year.
Mhm.
What I did initially was I used to audio record. I mean, I audio recorded Doctor Who, but I audio recorded other programs like the Sweeney, and then I would write them up as my own little
Okay.
adaptation, novelizations, if you like.
Mhm.
Um, and that I think was really useful because it gave me an idea of what dialogue looked like on the page
Yeah.
and got me into story structure and things like that. It was a really useful exercise that I think would still be useful for people today.
Yeah.
Um, uh, um, yeah, so I just kind of always wanted to do it, and getting into it was simply plugging away.
Yeah.
I sent a script in to Robert Holmes, not long after uh, Talons of Wing Chang had been broadcast. So at the early, I think 1977. So I was 14, and he sent it back. Liked it, but yeah, it wasn't right. But he wasn't. He was very supportive in his comments. And he did say maybe I'd like to go away and write for something else, something original, whatever. But I said if he didn't mind, I would like to continue to submit ideas. So that's where I sat out. But this one, Making of Doctor Who, had a thing at the back. It's a layout of a script. This is the robot. Tom Baker's story. So from that, I wrote a script that I sent to Robert Holmes, and he was quite supportive in his criticism, but said, would I like to maybe try writing for something else, a play or something, because I've got a few plays on TV at the time. I said if he didn't mind, I'd quite like to keep submitting ideas, and he'd sent me a flyer for this book, Writing for Television in the 70s, by Malcolm Hogg, which I've still got. It's on the bookcase behind me as well. And that was invaluable, because that laid out the rules and the methods of approaching scripts, and it had several example scripts, including one for Doctor Who, Carnival of Monsters, an excerpt for Carnival of Monsters.
Yeah.
So from that, it kind of gave me a good steer on approaching a TV script in a way that I knew to lay it out properly. So it looked professionally from that point of view before you even get to the content.
Yeah.
And I picked up things like not to have too many sets and that sort of thing. Kind of looking at it from a budgetary point of view and what could be achieved. And then I sent another script. This one went to Anthony Reid, and that came back with a lot of pencil annotations on it, and he was very supportive.
Yep.
Again, it wasn't commissioned, but it was encouraging. And after that, I sent in some storylines, and Douglas Adams invited me down to see him, and I was there for the studio recording of Creature from the Pit, and then we had a long chat about what I could do. Again, he was very encouraging. Bought me my first alcoholic drink. I was 17 then, I think. And then I was in contact with Chris Bidmead, and we had a discussion. He picked up this storyline I'd written called The Planet That Slept that I'd actually sent in to Douglas.
Yep.
And then he said, would I like to come down from Glasgow to talk to him? He said I live too far away for it to be practical for me to actually write, which I was quite disappointed by. But then I walked in the office and he said, yeah, we want to commission you to write the first episode and do a scene breakdown of the rest of what became Full Circle. And I couldn't believe it. And so I then did it. I wrote the first episode. I think at that point I did a scene breakdown of the rest of the serial.
Yeah.
And after a week I got a phone call that said, yeah, we'd like the rest. We'll commission. Yeah, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. So that's how I broke in. In the meantime, I was doing, or maybe subsequent to that, and it went out first, but I was writing I'd written comedy sketches for radio, thing on radio for Weekending, and I wrote for some of the first series of Not the 9 O'Clock News, just a couple of quickies and things.
Yep.
But those actually went out on TV before Full Circle was broadcast. But yeah, so Doctor Who, I didn't just want to write for Doctor Who, and this is a thing, I just wanted to be a writer. But Doctor Who was there. I mean, it took me 3 or 4 years, but it was there. Whereas other things, I was submitting ideas to things like Shoestring, BBC detective series, and again, I got an encouraging response there. But then it was there for 2 series, I think, and then it was gone. The Doctor Who, having approached in early '77, I was then commissioned in early 1980s, so 3 years then, and whereas on another series, they'd have been gone in that time. But Doctor Who was always there, so that was, like I say, that was quite convenient.
Cool.
For me.
Cool. Yeah. How come the name got changed to Full Circle? Was that something that you changed, or was that something
No. In fact, I don't like that title.
Okay.
Which I've mentioned in the past, but I really liked The Planet That Slept. I thought I was really keen on that title. No, I wasn't really consulted on it. It was changed. I got a phone call from Chris. It was very late in the day. I mean, I think we had rehearsal scripts run off. They were titled The Planet That Slept. And I think the cast, when they were contracted, were all contracted for The Planet That Slept. So it was very late in the day. I think it was before rehearsal and before the read-through. But it was very late in the day. I got a phone call from Chris telling me, not asking what I thought, but just telling me, oh, just to let you know, we've changed the title.
Okay.
It's called Full Circle, and I just didn't like. I didn't think it was nearly as impactful as The Planet That Slept.
Yeah.
And I remember Chris said John doesn't like titles that've got the word "of" in the title. You know, like The Face of Evil, The Robots of Death. And I said, Chris, it hasn't got "of" in the title. You know, The Planet That Slept.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't get me wrong. I wasn't fuming about it. I was a little, I wanted to keep that title.
Yeah.
I was still absolutely over the moon. Actually, I'd written a Doctor Who script, and it was being produced and made. It was going to be on the telly box.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. I was writing for television.
Yeah, awesome. Being only 17 at the time, and Doctor Who's youngest ever writer, how did that feel being part of Doctor Who?
The age thing didn't really come into it for me.
Yeah.
I was just writing and sending ideas in.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it hadn't occurred to me really for years, about in terms of what the production team would have thought of my age.
Yeah.
I think, Chris always told me when I came in, I don't know, Douglas had mentioned it, or because Douglas had met me, I don't know if anyone knew actually what my age was, but clearly they seen I was a young guy when I came in, a teenager, I guess. But it hadn't really occurred to me. I was interviewed by Radio Free Scarrow at the Gallifrey convention years ago.
Okay.
They're good friends of mine.
Yeah.
And they asked the question, did I tell the production my age?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I hadn't thought. I thought, no, I didn't. But then if I'd been 23 or 24, I wouldn't have said that either.
Yeah.
I was just writing scripts and sending them in, and the age was immaterial to me. Subsequently, I wrote a play for television that was produced by Scottish Television, starring Michael Sheard, actually, called Thieves. And on that, we were actually rehearsing and about to go to the studio with it. And it's part of a series of plays. And the head of drama at Scottish Television, Robert Love, was interviewed by the TV Times. And I saw the article, and he's previewing the plays that are coming up.
Mm-hmm. And
he mentioned mine, Thieves, and it said in the article, Thieves, written by Andrew Smith, brackets 23.
Yeah.
At the time I was 18 or 19. I think 18. And I was on the phone, I think the next day, and I didn't call him up. We were talking about something. And I said, I noticed in the article it says I'm 23. Where'd you get that from? And he said, oh, they asked me your age. And I thought, that's about right. That's about right, isn't it? I said, no, actually, I was 18. I said, no, I'm 18.
Yeah.
And they went, oh. And then the director, whose name escapes me, but was kind of old school. He'd come in a sports jacket and a shirt and tie. He started patronising the hell out of me. He went from really from just being, just very relaxed with me. And we'd go out for a meal and he'd get me I remember he brought me a brandy one time and no more drinks. And he really patronised the hell out of me now that he knew I was 18.
Great.
That was a bit annoying.
Great.
But I think I did. I think at that age I probably did look from Bob's remark, I did look a bit older than I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being writer for that episode, did you get to meet any of the cast members?
Full Circle.
Yeah. Did you get?
Yeah. I was there throughout. Really, I was there at the read through at Acton, and then I was there for the location filming in July 1980, and I was there throughout the two studio blocks.
Awesome.
As well, and I tend to hang out with Matthew and Richard, Bernard, and June, the Outlers, and chat with the others. George Baker was great. He had a lovely chat with me one day. I was walking through the studio. He was got some stairs. I'm like, oh, and he came over and had a chat and said how much he enjoyed it. And then and again talked to me about building a career and that kind of thing. He was a lovely, lovely guy.
Yeah.
But they all were, they were all really good company. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. You kind of covered this a little bit earlier, but was you a fan previously of Doctor Who, and did you watch the show in the past?
Oh yeah. I was a bona fide fan.
Okay.
Something I tried to keep a bit on the down low when I was working on it, because I didn't want to be regarded, as this is something that's very much changed.
Mm-hmm.
The show now, and ever since it came back in 2006, very much the writers they are fans.
Yeah.
The majority have been fans, and many of them, like me, especially in that first tranche, like me, were fans back in the 80s, 70s, even the 60s.
Yeah.
Whereas back then, I didn't really highlight that or make it known at all. I just wanted, I'm here as the writer.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a fan of the show, and I've been a fan since I can remember. Really, I remember watching Patrick Troughton.
Yep.
My earliest memories are of the Quarks and the Dominators, Yeti in the Underground. I remember very, very clearly watching and being scared by that.
Mm-hmm.
Cybermen, but the Doctor and Jamie, for me, have quite vivid memories from the 60s.
Yeah.
So I'd have been about 6 years old.
Okay.
My first memories, and then watched it avidly. And I can remember standing specifically not long after I got the gig of writing Full Circle, standing on the platform at Girl Street Station in Glasgow, and just thinking if little me had been watching John Pertwee, he'd thought just a very few years later would be actually writing for the show.
Wow.
I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah.
So it was quite something, and I got that thing of writing for television, not just writing for television, but writing for Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Was quite it felt quite something.
Awesome.
But I've been a fan. I'd actually my appreciation of the program stepped up around about whenever the Planet of Evil went out.
Okay.
So Tom's second season, so 75, 76.
Yeah.
The family we went on a weekend break in Blackpool, and I visited the Doctor Who exhibition and got my first Target books there, and that kind of elevated my fandom a bit. And I think it was I think the books contained the details of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society of WAF.
Yeah.
And I finished up joining that, and sort of connected with other, kind of became part of fandom.
Yeah.
Through that, and got the TARDIS fanzine, and even contributed some things to the TARDIS fanzine from time to time. So yeah, and I was a pucker fan.
Yeah.
I was a pucker fan before it was fashionable to be a fan and be a writer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just talking about time.
Matthew Waterhouse was a fan as well, so as was Bernard Padden. But again, a lot of us, we kind of kept a lid on it.
Yeah.
Kept quiet. Because again, I think fans were kind of regarded as a thing separate from the show at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike today. Yeah.
Just talking about Target books. 2 years later, after Full Circle, the Target book was released. Was this already arranged before the TV episodes was aired, or was you approached after this?
I was approached after, but it was I kind of knew it would be part of the process, because every serial at that time was novelised, and usually novelised by Chris. And I was approached, I'm not sure how long after. I mean, the book came out 2 years after the show, but there was a reason for that I'll come on to. But I was approached and asked for my permission for Terence to write it, and I said, actually, I'd like to write it. I was very keen to do it, and I was very pleased to do it. I had to put it off because there was a Writers Guild strike around that time. It would have been, I think this must have been several months after the TV production.
Okay.
So I couldn't do it because of the Writers Guild strike. So I had to put it off, and that's why it wasn't written until 1982.
Okay.
I really enjoyed that, and I was really pleased with the result.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. You also.
And in fact, Target books as well is that I'd grown up with them as well.
Yeah.
And I got to the point I got those on day of first release by mail order. So it was good to be able to get the target book done.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was and remain a huge fan of Terence Dicks. And actually, in the police, I worked with his son briefly, Jonathan. But I did feel by that point, Terence had done a lot of books, and I felt they'd just become a little lean, a little slight, a little too direct, like just scripts adapted to a novel with, not much detail. And I really wanted to do something that's more like the target books I remembered from back in the 70s in particular, early in the 70s. And just do something that fleshed it out a little bit, something that absolutely authentically replicated what was on the screen, but also provided a little bit more detail. And as I say, I was very pleased with the outcome and with the way it was received.
Yeah.
I've just come back to the target books in a way. Actually, I got to this. I've got a box of them upstairs in the attic, and I was thinking, well, I haven't read them for years.
Yeah.
But I recently, thanks to Jim Sangster, I was pointed at a podcast called the Doctor of Literature podcast. If you know, I suppose I should talk about another podcast, but I'll start it. But anyway, this is a podcast on target books, and I kind of listened to a few of those. Specifically, I think one of the Chris's novelizations of Legopolis and Castrovalva, and Horror Rock's another one they just listened to recently, and it's kind of drew me up again to go back and read those target books.
Yeah.
Which were for years before VHS and video recorders, which really only came in around the time of season 18 or even season 19. As a thing that most households had. Books for years were how we fans revisited our Doctor Who series. Yeah. So it was a real tick in the box for me to get to do the target novelisation.
Yeah, I've only just started reading the target books over the last sort of 5 years. So I grew up in sort of the late 80s, so Doctor Who had just finished. But I used to borrow my uncle's sort of VHS. He had a whole collection of Doctor Who, so I used to borrow them, just watch them constantly, then bring some back, collect some more off him. But I didn't really know much about target books until sort of I was older, and sort of over the last 5 years I've just got really into them. So that's kind of my nighttime schedule now, is reading a couple of hours.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, glad to hear it. Very glad to hear it. Yeah, lovely stuff.
Yeah. So just moving on a bit after Doctor Who, you become a police officer. Why did you choose to go into this role?
I was a writer for 4.5 years, and did other things for TV and radio, etc. But the police was something I began to worry about the security of it, and particularly the solitary nature of it. I kind of rediscovered how solitary it is, but I've got my other aspects of life around in a minute.
Yeah.
At the time, I know, 18, getting in my early 20s, and I did find it extremely solitary.
Okay.
And the police was something I've been very interested in. It's why I'd studied law at university. Ever since they had a career film, a police officer came in and showed us a career film at school, and I'd been interested, and I kind of wanted a little bit of excitement and adventure. And so I applied. I finished up. I applied to the Met and got in there, and I had an absolute blast. I got way, it was so much more than I expected. I was extremely lucky.
Yep.
I think with the career that I had, I spent about 5 years at Brixton.
Okay.
Which was an incredible place to work. Then I went spent most of the rest of my career in counter-terrorism in Special Branch for many years, which became the Counter-Terrorism Command and various attachments to other agencies and government departments. Finished up as a detective chief inspector and had a great time.
Yeah.
And really, really, really rewarding. Really rewarding and exciting.
Yeah.
At times a little too exciting time to time, but you know, that's part of the buzz.
Nice.
And So, but that's why it had always been a thing that I was really drawn to.
Okay.
And still, so I mean, policing these days, and actually at the moment, the Met in particular, is going through a rough patch, and I don't know what the hell's happening with the Met. And that's usually when I meet up with other retired colleagues. That's usually the first line of the conversation: "What the hell has happened to the Met?" But hopefully they'll sort themselves out because it's not the Met I recognise.
Okay. Cool. So many years later, you was asked to be writer for Big Finish audio dramas on Doctor Who. How did this role come about?
Yeah.
And how did it feel being asked to be part of Doctor Who again?
Right, it came about. I was still in the police, and I think, the East Base trilogy DVD had just come out. I think it was early 2010, might have been 2009.
Okay.
I was invited to be a guest at a Doctor Who convention in Glasgow. And I went to that, and David Richardson and Nick Briggs from Big Finish were there. And David and Nick both approached me and asked if I'd like to write for them. And David in particular mentioned The First Centaureans, which was a story that I'd been commissioned to write by Eric Sayward. And it had gone to the scene breakdown stage, but no further than that. And it was replaced by the two doctors by written by Bob Holmes. And in fact, David mentioned it to me. Would you be interested in adapting The First Centaureans for this range we've got called The Lost Stories? And the first words out of my mouth were, I don't know if the BBC would let you do it because it's a Centaureans origin story. Like an idiot. I was talking myself out of it. But that was it. And then David and I, said to David Anthony, yeah, I'd love to. And then David got back to me and asked specifically if I'd like to write a story for the Companion Chronicle. Okay. Which I've never discussed it with David, but I suspect the Companion Chronicles, being smaller, not what was then called the main range, monthly range.
Okay.
Might have been something, maybe just trying me out, because it'd been a while.
Yep.
So I wrote that, and I remember being really nervous about it. But David took a while to come back to me actually on the first draft, and I got to the point I was convinced that, oh my God, I've not this up, whatever. But then he came back and said, no, we love it. And gave me notes. And I wrote the second draft. We were off to the races, really. And then it just took off from there. I did the adaptation of The First Centaureans, which remains one of my favourite scripts. And it was a real pleasure to finally get to do that and have it produced. Because there were aspects of the story I still remembered. Much of it I didn't remember, but I still had the storylines and scene breakdowns to help me reading it. And I'm not sure how many I've written now. 40 or so.
Wow.
I think.
Wow.
But it's been So that's over about what's that now? Got 12 or 13 years now.
Yeah. Awesome.
But it's been good, and moved on to script editing as well on series like Survivors and Star Cops.
Cool.
Big Finish.
Cool. Just staying on Big Finish, is there any stories in the series that you are proud of the most, or had the most fun writing or being part of?
Oh, I'd say there's a lot of them are fun, and there's quite a few of them as well. When I was approached and said, would you like to do this, or could you do this for us? And you're like, wow. I mean, I remember actually getting a call from David saying asking me to write for a first series of Unit.
Yep.
With Gemma Redgrave and Edward Oliver, because that was the first kind of modern series thing, and it was a huge secret at the time. It was the very first. I mean, Big Finish had not done anything to do with the modern series at that point.
Okay.
And and we even before we submitted for like Stephen Moffat and others to look at storylines, we went through so many iterations of it, and it was about making them punchier, different from the storylines we'd done before. And I was getting notes like, can you make it shorter sentences, maybe put an exclamation mark in it, and it just making it punchy and fast moving, and very much of the modern series style. That was something. Being asked to write for the War Doctor, I get that again was that was a big secret, and I was so pleased actually when that was announced fairly early on.
Yeah.
Because I think we'd had a leak of the fact that David Tennant and Catherine Tate were working on Big Finish, so that was leaked before it was announced. That happened around about the time we started the War Doctor, and I was really nervous about that being leaked, and then it'd be like, who blabbed? But then it was announced, and that was a relief. So I did 2 of those. Though, being asked to write and script edit Star Cops was the big thing. And if I was out and about, I got an email from Dave. I saw it on my phone. It said Star Cops. Oh, brilliant! We're doing Star Cops. I'm getting to write for Star Cops. And I said, I think, I'm out and about. I'll get back to you later. But yes, thank you. And then I got back, read it properly, and I was being asked to script edit it, also with my policing background, because Star Cops is very much about a genuine policing. But okay, it tells us So there's I'm proud of so much of it.
Yeah.
I'd have to mention the first Centauran's, The Domain of the Bird, 2 of my early ones. I think there are 2 episodes I did with Survivors that I love. The opening and closing episode of Series 5 of Survivors.
Okay.
Doctor Who, I got a particular fondness. I'm particularly pleased and proud of the Barbarians and the Samurai for the first Doctor Adventures, that was a labour of love. It's an pure historical.
Yeah.
Set in early 19th century Japan during the period of seclusion. It's a period of history that absolutely fascinates me, and I had actually pitched a version of that, a different version of that to the series back in about 1983.
Okay.
Everyone said it would just been too expensive to do. But the Barbarians and the Samurai, I love that one to bits. And it was great. We had a Japanese cast that came in and said how much they liked it and how authentic it sounded as well. I must say, from a research point of view, I love my research. I think it's actually a bonus of the job. It's a perk of the job that you get educated while you do. So I research things to the nth degree, and I already knew quite a bit about this period of Japanese history, but it seemed like almost every scene I was having to look at the research, like if they come into a kitchen in a Japanese castle, what's on the floor, what kind of door does it have?
Yeah.
Do they have hinged doors, sliding doors? Is it tatami mats on the floor? Is it straw? Is it hay? What kind of tools have they got? Is it brick walls? What for the ambience, for the sound designer?
Yeah.
As well as the things of talking about the historical context. But yeah, I think I'd probably put that one at the top of the pile, the Barbarians and the Samurai.
Cool. Awesome stuff. Could you tell me what you have lined up for the future and look forward to working on?
Not much to tell you, because I get a lot that's just shrouded in secrecy and what have you.
That's understandable.
I'm just redrafting a script at the moment. I'm actually also working on, a couple of my own things that I want to take forward. I can't talk about them at the minute.
Okay.
But we have got there's another set of Star Cops coming up. I'm really pleased with.
Okay.
It's our 7th and 8th. Well, it's actually our 4th series. It's in 2 sets, and that's called Blood Moon. I believe the first one's coming out in November.
Okay.
We've got scripts by Una McCormack, Roland Moore, and a new very good writer called Nicola Baldwin. And I've written a couple of episodes for that. Oh, James Swallow is also. James had written the opening episode of the 2nd set, which comes out I think in the spring of next year.
Okay.
And that's a beauty. Now, he's someone who'd written quite a bit for Big Finish in the past. I hadn't written for Big Finish in a while. I was a big Star Cops fan.
Okay.
He came on board and he knocked it out of the park.
Cool.
He's written an episode called A Cage of Sky. And we've done something I don't think I can even properly hint at it, but there's a kind of a big surprise, a revelation for one of the team that kind of forms the basis of that. I'm extremely proud of that. So that's coming up, first of all, in November.
Yeah.
And I love Star Cops. I eulogise about it. I mean, it's authentic policing drama as it might be in 40 years' time. Yeah. It's not a space opera, monsters and faster than light drives or anything like that. It's what do we think the world might be like in 40 years' time, and there would be crime and there would be police officers dealing with crime. So it's murder and drugs and everything else, and authentic police officers. Cool. Yeah, so that's coming up. And the thing I'm writing at the minute is I'm just about to submit a second draft. I can't really say anything about it.
That's fine.
But again,
that's fair enough.
It's classic series mixed with a bit of modern series and a monster from the classic series that I'm very, very pleased to be writing.
Cool.
That's about that, I think.
Cool. Look forward to seeing it. We'll look forward to seeing it when it comes out. Apart from writing taking up a lot of your time, do you have any hobbies that you enjoy doing?
Mainly running. Love my running. In fact, I completed a charity. I did a charity 10K with some of my big Finnish writing colleagues back in June, and we raised a wad of cash for Macmillan Cancer.
Okay.
In that run. That was really nice. What a hot day. It was at Dorney Lake. John Dorney was there. We were at Dorney Lake. God, that was a hot day. But I also did my very first half marathon in July. Which runs the Lily charity, the Lily Foundation, which is very, very close to my heart. We actually have another run together that we planned, not for charity, but another. We're all going out in a half marathon.
Okay.
So look forward to that. That's later. We're going to do that later. We're training for it in a minute later in the year. But I've done my first half marathon and I've decided to subject myself to it again. So that is my chief hobby, really. And I've discovered cooking as well in the last year and a half. That's another one. I like cycling and golf, but I haven't been on a golf course for a little while.
Yeah. It's the same as me.
Yeah,
same as me with golf. I enjoyed it. Yeah. Just after lockdown, I started getting back into it for about a year, and since then I haven't been back. Yeah. And you said about Dorney Lake. That was my first 10K run there.
Right. Yeah. So it's nice and flat, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it was nice. I haven't done any more than 10K. I've done about 4 10Ks, but I've been meaning to get something booked and get back into the routine.
Yeah, 10K is a good one. Yeah. I've done quite a few. I've done the Great Scottish Run 10K a few times. I just look at the medals trying to count them, but I think I've done 5 or 6 of those. And I did a Central London one last year. That was really good. Starting and finished around by Buckingham Palace and going out to St Paul's.
Wow.
I've done Hampton Court is another one I've done.
Okay.
And, my half marathon was at Goodwood Motor Circuit.
Okay.
Which had a bit more of an incline on it than I was expecting, but relatively flat. It's not too bad.
Lovely.
I don't mind. I don't mind an incline.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a bit of a challenge in there.
Lovely. Just one last question then. What advice would you give for anyone that wants to become a writer or is maybe struggling to progress in that career path?
Yeah, plug away at it, really. Have faith in yourself. And just keep plugging away. It's funny, I mean, the way I did it is not something you can do now. You cannot send spec scripts in to a TV show and have them read because it's just a more litigious time. You certainly can't send them into the Doctor Who because, again, these days, I mean, if you sent something in and it was read and sent back, and then even a couple of years later, 3, 4, 5 years later, something on a similar idea is done. In this day and age, it's so much more open for people just say, "Oh, you stole my idea."
Yeah.
When it's all quite innocent. So, that can't be done. But what is good now, people can get the software to actually, and there are so many more sources with the internet, so many more sources to tell you how to approach structuring something and getting it in a state that's should be well received.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'd say, write what you want to write for yourself. Write something you want to write, something you're interested in, stories and characters that you're interested in.
Yep.
That's it. Just plug away and good luck, really.
Lovely.
And have, and believe in yourself. And actually, if you are starting out, if you're young and if you're a teenager, maybe like I was, or younger, and you kind of want to get a feel what looks on the page. I mean, some people that approach script writing, getting dialogue right can be problematic. And one of the ways to approach it, if you were to, just look at one of your favorite shows and and maybe even record it and write the script yourself, and just see how it is on the page. And also, you can access scripts now, things like the BBC Writers' Room.
Yeah.
And actually, physically, just replicating that and going through that just to see what the dialogue looks like on the page and how it is to write it. And it might seem a very itty-bitty way of doing it, but I just think it was so useful to me at a very, very early age.
Okay.
You're 9, 10 years old to to audio record programs and write them out in prose style. I think that paid off hugely and really educated me, particularly in story structure, but particularly how to write natural dialogue.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for the advice. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for speaking to me, telling me about your career.
Yes, great.
It's been awesome.
My pleasure. Thanks for wanting to talk to me.
That's all right. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for speaking to me. It's been awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I'm glad the builders disappeared.
Yeah,
that's been really annoying.
Yeah, no, that would have been a nightmare.
Although it'd be the Big Finish podcast, when the office was in Brockley and they used to do it from there, you used to hear trains passing by from time to time. In that
office. Really?
Yeah. That would have been great. To suffer from that kind of thing. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah,
mate.
you too.
Son, I'm going to go. Well, I'm going to ingest some calories and then go for a run.